Hello, my name is Scott Payton. I am the Global Certification Manager for Exemplar Global. I would like to welcome you to this video training session on ISO 19011-2018. This is the third of a series of training sessions designed to help you prepare for and pass Exemplar Global's AU and TL auditor assessments. The first video was an overview of ISO 19011-2018. It was designed to give you a comprehensive overview of the standard to help you know it better. The second video training session was designed for Exemplar Global Certified Auditors. It covers information contained in the AU assessment. This, the third training session, is designed for lead auditors. It covers information contained in the Team Leader Assessment. We encourage all of our certified auditors who need to take the AU assessment to watch both the overview session and the AU training session. Lead auditors should watch all three. All three of our sessions are presented by Denise Robitaille. Denise served as the chair of ISO PC 302, which is the technical committee that developed the ISO 19011-2018 standard revision. Denise is an auditor, trainer, and consultant on ISO management system standards, and she is a prolific author with more than a dozen books in print. After Denise concludes her presentation, I will be back with more information on how to actually register for and take the assessment. Finally, we want to stress the need for auditors to actually read and understand the ISO 19011-2018 standard itself. We have included a link to purchase the standard in this presentation from the ASQ web store. The standard may also be purchased from the American National Standards Institute, ANSI, and from your local national standards body. Denise, take it away.
Thank you very much, Scott. And welcome to this third training on ISO 19011-2018, dealing with lead auditor training. What we're going to cover here are the responsibilities of the audit team leader relating to the various aspects of your audit program, including planning, conducting the audit, managing the audit team, audit reporting, and the maintenance of competence. So next up is I want to emphasize that in order to take this training, you should have already taken the two previous trainings, the introductory one as well as one having to do with the auditor training. Again, I want to emphasize that in order for this training to work, the other two have to have been completed. All right, a reiteration of where you may acquire the standards. Scott has already mentioned that in addition to ASQ, you can also get them from ANSI or from your national standards development bodies. So going forward, the rest of this training is focused specifically on the team leader qualifications, responsibilities, and activities. We want to remind everyone about the flow of the audit program. As a team leader, the audit, this auditor is more involved with some of the activities that are in Section 5 of the standard. So when we get to the point where we begin the implementation of the audit program and the selection of the team leader, this is when that engagement begins. And also, as we go forward with the monitoring of the audit program, participating in the evaluation of the auditors, as we'll see as we go forward, these are some of the activities of the audit program that are within the purview of the responsibilities of the team leader. As we look down at the activities under Section 6, all of these activities require the team leader to be ultimately responsible. Team leader is responsible for all activities relating to the audit for each individual audit, beginning from when it is initiated until the follow-up is concluded. So next, if you will recall, we've talked about terms and conditions in the prior two presentations. There's one particular note that I want to call to your attention, and that is under the definition that is found in 3.14. And it is to be noted that if there is only one member of the team, then that team is indeed the team leader. However, if there are more than one, then it is appropriate for a team leader to be appointed. You never have an audit team in which there is not a team leader. Okay, next up is we're going to jump over to managing the audit program, and I want to reiterate here that what we are discussing are the responsibilities of the audit team leader in relation to these various clauses of 19,011. So once the manager of the audit program is the one who assigns the audit team leader. Once that person is assigned, going forward, the audit team leader is the one who has responsibility for the audit. The person managing the audit program may consult with the audit team leader after that individual has been assigned in order to make some decisions in relation to the selection of the rest of the audit team. They're not required to do that, but it is often appropriate to engage in dialogue with the team leader about the rest of the audit team. Next, 5.5. The audit team leader should be appointed with sufficient time to allow for appropriate planning. So if you are the team leader, you have the right to push back a little bit if you have someone who manages an audit program who repeatedly does not give you adequate time to do your planning, to contact your the auditee, and to get all the activities in place that need to be handled before you show up on site for that audit. So although the responsibility lies with the manager of the audit team program, the team leader is the one who is most immediately affected if there is not sufficient time allocated for appropriate planning. The other thing to remember in terms of the assignment of those audits is that if you have a joint audit, and again, I refer you back to your terms and definitions. It's important for you to know what a joint audit is. It is one in which two audits are combined that are being conducted by two different agencies. For example, there might be a 13485 audit that is being conducted at the same time as an FDA audit. So you have a regulatory audit being done at the same time as a management system audit is being conducted. In that instance, you still have only one team leader, so there has to be agreement over who the team leader is and what kind of authority that team leader has. All right, next. So as you manage the audit program, this is the information that the audit team leader must be provided. Now, we have two responsibilities here that we are discussing. Well, on the one hand, you've got the manager of the audit program who is responsible for providing this information, and it's up to the team leader to make sure that that information is indeed provided and to take action if that information is not provided in a timely manner and if that information is incomplete. And these are the things that the audit team leader must have in order to be able to begin planning the audit. Those things have to do with the objective and the criteria, any processes and methods that are that have been determined by the audit program. They need to know who the team is. It is not appropriate, and it has not happened to me in a very, very long time, but I can recall probably almost 20 years ago showing up for an audit and no one had met anyone or was aware of who the other team members were, and that is completely inappropriate. You should know ahead of time who the other team members are, and that has all been decided long before the audit takes place. The other thing that's provided is the contact information for the auditee, and that should be adequate. It should not be simply one form. It might take the form of an email and the phone number, and there should be other information in terms of the location, especially if it's a multi-site organization and things of that nature. Additionally, as appropriate, the following considerations should be made, whether there's a language issue. And, we talked about virtual auditing earlier, and, oftentimes you're dealing different countries. You could have multiple language, so in that case, you may want to make sure there's someone on the team who speaks a second language. You want to make sure that everyone's clear on the reporting and distribution requirements. It's particularly important at the joint audit. Health and safety arrangements that need to be made prior to the audit. It could be as easy as making sure that people are advised whether or not they need to bring their own steel-toed shoes, or if the audit's being conducted in an area where someone has to get their shots before they come into the country. Things having to do with travel and security, both the security of persons as well as any security in terms of information that need to be communicated prior to the beginning of the audit. All of these things are provided by the team leader, or by the audit program manager to the team leader, and the team leader has every right to expect and to require this information to be provided. Okay, so then we have the initiation of the audit. And if you recall from the prior training that we did, initiating the audit is stuff that is actually upstream of actually beginning the audit on site. And so some of the things that are now the responsibility of the team leader. So now the program manager is out of the picture, and the team leader is the one who is responsible from this moment on for the rest of the audit activities. Confirming communication channels. You know, if it's one site, then that's not terribly complicated. If there are multiple sites, or if there's communications that have to occur prior to arriving on site, all those things have to be established. Provide all of that information to the auditee to make sure that everyone is on the same page as to what the objective of the audit is, what the scope and the criteria are, and who the team members are. Whether or not there will be technical experts and observers, and there will be more information on that coming up in another slide. If there are regulatory requirements that have to be taken into consideration as part of this audit, there needs to be discussion with the client beforehand to make sure that that's understood. Disclosure of confidential information, discussion as to what will be disclosed, how it will be disclosed. Usually it's a matter of saying that, you know, the information will not be disclosed outside of, for example, the registrar or the certification body's organization. In other instances, there are other things that, other arrangements that need to be made. In some cases, that confidentiality might limit some aspects of the audit, and then we jump back to that feasibility that we talked about earlier, where someone might say, you know, there's this whole area that you can't look at, and if some of the stuff that needs to be audited is in that area, then we're back to that which we discussed in the last training session having to do with feasibility. Arrangement for scheduling, it's appropriate to speak with the auditee about what kind of constraints they have on their schedules, if they have multiple shifts, if, for example, manufacturing begins at 5 and ends at 1 o'clock in the afternoon, then obviously you can't be out on the production floor at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. And advise the auditee of how many guides you will need. If you have 4 people on your team, then you're going to need 4 guides. So those are some of the things that have to be communicated with the auditee before you can even begin the process of planning the audit. Okay, so now we get into the audit planning. We get into some of that risk-based approach to the audit planning and some of the things that you have to consider. Competence of the team, you want to have, for example, the person who is strongest on chemistry. If you've got a facility where they're doing a lot of chemical processes and they're doing testing, then if you put the person in there who has the least amount of competence is the weakest one, then you risk not having a really good outcome in that particular portion of the audit not being effective. So the risks and opportunities that you get, you want to take into consideration where to best place your people. What kind of sampling techniques are appropriate for the kind of place that you're going to be auditing. Ineffective audit planning. Ineffective audit planning has to do with, planning audits when a lot of people are off-site, or not having the right person doing that particular process if you've got multiple people conducting the audit, or you have unqualified auditors. So, and then there are risks to the auditee created by the audit. If you have auditors who do not have appropriate competence and don't, for example, know all the rules around confidentiality, then there's a risk to the auditee of the inadvertent disclosure of proprietary information. So we've got to make sure that as you're planning this, that all of this information is digested as you put the plan together. Obviously, the other thing is that you want to make sure that you know enough about the auditee's internal schedule so that you don't blunder and have to do multiple iterations of your audit plan. Assigning work to the team, we've talked about this a little bit before. Impartiality is something that you worry about more with internal audits than you do with third-party audits. Competence is a bigger factor, as we've just mentioned. You want to make sure that you put those folks who have the greatest competence auditing those processes that are more closely related to their competences. If you've got someone who has a strong design background, then that would be a good process for them to be auditing. Someone who has spent some time dealing with call centers might be someone that you would have auditing the customer service areas. It's appropriate, and as you can see from this, it's important for the audit team leader to have information about who his team members are, or her team members are. Other things that you want to be able to have the contingency for is during the course of the audit, the need that you might have for reallocation of auditors. If you've got two people can do something and you take your first choice, and then you find out that because some things have been delayed, it's taken longer to get some processes audited, or the auditee had some people off site unexpectedly, that you might have to switch out some auditors. Again, you want to figure out who are the best people to plug in there and still make sure that you have an effective audit. All right, next, guides and observers. The guides and the observers can accompany the team based upon the approval of the team leader, the audit client, and or the auditee. Now, the guides are usually at the behest of the auditee. They're the ones who usually select the guides. However, it may be a situation in which the team leader has a concern about whether or not this guide is, during the course of the audit, trying to exert too much of an influence, or is too disruptive, or is interrupting interviews inappropriately. That team leader can ask for another guide. If you have an observer, the team leader has the prerogative to deny an observer from being present during the course of an audit. Guides and observers are part of the audit process. Guides are assigned by the auditees. Observers generally accompany the audit team. They are approved by the team leader, the audit client, and or the auditee. Since the auditee usually selects the guides, they probably have approved them. That's an appropriate assumption to make. However, if the team leader feels that the guide is being too disruptive or is interrupting interviews, the team leader can request another guide. Additionally, if the team leader has a concern that an observer may exert undue influence on an audit, the team leader may deny an observer to be present during the audit. Typical examples of that are sometimes consultants who attempt to speak for their clients and don't allow their clients to speak. And in that instance, the team leader can simply ask that individual to exit, to leave the audit. Next, so now we've gotten to the actual audit itself, the opening meeting. The team leader chairs that meeting, responsible for making sure that all of the following things are confirmed. The agreement of all our participants as to the audit plan. Or are there any changes that have to be made to the audit plan? Overnight, we found out that somebody needs a root canal. We're going to have to make a change to the audit plan. All of these things get covered during that opening meeting. The team leader will also introduce the other the rest of the audit team describe their roles. If there is an observer, we'll also mention this individual is an observer. If also that observer happens to be a witness for the purpose of qualifying or requalifying an auditor, also to be noted, this individual is not only an observer, this person is a witness. This is all covered during the opening meeting. Then afterwards, following things must always be covered during the opening meeting: the reiteration of the scope, the objectives, and the criteria. And one of the reasons this is important is there may be people in the opening meeting who are not privy to the conversations and the communications that occurred between the team leader and the primary contact at the auditee's location. You want to make sure that everyone who is present at the opening meeting, who is involved with it, has had the opportunity to hear what that scope, objective, and criteria are. Some of the other things that we have previously mentioned: the language has to be reiterated, communication methods. In a very large facility, it's possible that, you have to say, how do we communicate back to the office if we're out on the production floor? Other instances, it's a matter of communicating between facilities, sometimes in different countries. Availability of resources. What does the audit team require? They require a meeting room. They require access to electronic files. Confidentiality and security. This is always reiterated. It may be that there are non-disclosure agreements that have been signed, or there's simply a statement that it is understood that everything that is observed is considered confidential. If there's security concerns that the auditee has to communicate, this is the time when the auditee will again reiterate any of the security protocols that are in place. Also important to discuss during the opening meeting are the possible kinds of findings and the grading of those findings. Usually we're talking about a major nonconformance, a minor nonconformance, and an opportunity for improvement. Those are usually the ubiquitous three that you will find. There may be variations on those in some different audit programs. Again, you want to talk about any safety issues, security issues, and the emergency arrangements. It is appropriate during that opening meeting to have someone from the auditee's perspective tell you where the exits are and what to do in the event of an emergency. Communications during the audit. If it's a regulatory body that's part of that audit, sometimes they have different rules, and they may have some instances in which some findings will cause the audit to be halted because there is a finding that is of appreciable magnitude. So in those instances, the communication methods have to be very rigidly described. Where do I find you if this particular incident occurs? Other than that, communications methods are dependent on the size of the organization, how many locations there are. You also want to make sure that you set up within your schedule the opportunity for periodic meetings with your team, just to check everyone's status and any updates and any concerns that anyone has that may need to be further verified by looking at a similar situation in another process. Some of the other things that need to be communicated is if someone becomes aware of the fact that some of the audit objectives are unattainable. If someone has been assigned to a major process and they go into that area and it is clear that there is absolutely nothing to see, there is nothing to audit, and let us say that it's a company that advertises their hallmark is their design processes, and you get there and there ain't got nothing going on, and then it becomes unattainable. So all of these things, you have to ensure that you've got communication methods and that you've allowed times in order to be able to discuss these. Also, there might be things that occur that are outside of the scope of the audit that it is appropriate to ensure get reported back to the team leader, particularly if something is observed that is fraudulent or illegal. So it is appropriate to communicate those. Again, if there's a regulatory body involved, some of these things are even that much more important. So we go from conducting that meeting. Most of the stuff having to do with actually conducting the meeting were in the previous training that we did, those things having to do with the collection of evidence, etc. And now we are at the closing meeting where all of the information has been gathered. There has been a meeting with the rest of the team in order to determine what findings there are. And now is the time for the closing meeting. The closing meeting is chaired by the team leader. At that time, many of the items that were the subject of the opening meeting are reiterated. That includes, scope, objective, etc. All those things get repeated during the closing meeting, as well as issues having to do with confidentiality. The audit evidence that was collected and the methods of sampling are noted. The method that the report will take, whether it is a report that will be free form and just generated, or it is something that's an electronic form, whether that form is going to be left with the auditee at the closing meeting, or if it's something that has to be reviewed by the program manager before it can be presented to them, how the findings will be presented and how they need to be addressed, whether they are of magnitude that require corrective action, or if they're simply observations or opportunities for improvement that need to be considered. What post-audit activities have to occur? Obviously, corrective actions are the heavy hitter there. If during the course of the audit there were any diverging opinions where there was a finding and the auditor disagreed with the auditee as to what conclusion could be reached based upon the evidence, that needs to be noted during the closing meeting, and it will also be noted within the report. If there are any recommendations for improvement, and that, we've got to be careful, they're not really, this is not about consulting or telling people how to solve their problems. However, because one of the management principles has to do with improvement, it's appropriate for auditors to observe that for the system to be effective, there's certain improvements that would be to consider. So all of those activities occur, and all these topics are covered during the closing meeting. We have to prepare the audit report. Again, the team leader is responsible for authoring the audit report. It is based upon the findings. It is based upon the evidence that has been accumulated by the entire team. So you've got to ensure that all the team members have understood that they're going to have to provide adequate information so that the audit report can indeed be generated. It has to be complete, concise, clear, and it has to include all the things that are listed here. The items from the opening and closing meeting. Audit findings, and here it's important to note that if an audit finding is not mentioned during the closing meeting, it cannot be included in the audit report. The expectation is that if it's going to the report, it has been reported during the closing meeting. Risks associated with the sampling. This is usually just a statement that says that this is a snapshot in time, that we took a sampling, this was the sampling method that we used. However, it is understood that because we didn't look at 100%, that there is the possibility that there is still things that are not 100% perfect. However, there has been adequate sampling to ensure that we can conclude that the process is well controlled. Good practices that have been identified is an appropriate thing also to include in the audit report. If there are corrective actions or other follow-ups that are required, then there's an agreed upon time. Give them, you need to respond, for example, in 60 days. And whatever the implications are for the audit program or for subsequent audits. So for example, if you say you need to respond to this corrective action request within 60 days, what are the consequences of not doing that? Well, if we have not heard from you, then you will be cautioned. And if another 100 days pass, then your certificate will be considered lapsed. For example, that might be a scenario. All of these things get included in that audit report. And that gets forwarded to the program manager. The program manager is responsible for determining how the audit report is distributed, and that is based on what the audit client has determined. So what is important about this is that generally the auditee will get the audit report. However, it may not be everyone within that particular organization who has access to that report. If you have an organization that has 3 divisions under one roof, and only one of them was within the scope of the audit that you did, it is not appropriate for you to distribute that audit report to the other 2 divisions unless you are so directed by the program manager. So it's got to be very, very specific. It must also be distributed in a timely manner and to the relevant parties, but only as defined by the audit program. This is not something where you can just send it out and give it out to anybody who asks for it. Extremely important because of that last bullet. You have to retain the confidentiality of the entire audit process all the way through audit report. There are additional skills that a team leader should have in an above and beyond that which all auditors need to have. They have to have additional skills around audit planning and assigning of tasks. They have to have the competence to be able to discuss strategic issues with the top management. Manage uncertainty around meeting audit objectives. Is it possible that based upon the evidence that we have here, we might not be able to achieve the audit objectives, or is another manner in which we can get the evidence that we require so that we can achieve the audit objectives? They're the ones who are ensuring that all of the members of that audit team are conducting themselves in a way that ensures their health and their safety. They are the ones who ask the questions and make sure that their team is protected and that their team knows how to ask questions to ensure that they are protected. So in all instances, they direct the team. If there are any auditors in training, which is another category of observers I hadn't mentioned before, if there are auditors in training, they also provide guidance to those individuals during the course of the audit. They have to be able to reach a conclusion. In some cases, you may have differing opinions between 2 different auditors. It is the team leader who makes the determination and arrives at the conclusion. And they have to have the competence to be able to prepare and complete an audit report. Audit team leaders have, they've got to acquire these additional skills. And one of the ways in which they do that is by spending a certain amount of time under the direct guidance of another team leader. So you can't have someone who is a team leader who has never audited before. You don't start out as a team leader from the get-go. You must have had a multiple set of audits in which you were an auditor and you worked under a team leader so that you can observe some of the good practices that a team leader has. One of the other responsibilities that sometimes falls on the team leader is the evaluation of the audit team members. So one of those methods that you used, mentioned earlier, that auditors should be aware of the methods that are used to conduct evaluations, and they need to know that if one of those methods is that they might be interviewed or evaluated by their team leader. It is important for team leaders to maintain their competence, and they have to have that extra competence above and beyond auditors. And one of them is to actually participate in a management system audit, other than one in which they are the lead, one in which someone else is the lead, so that they can see other audit team leaders, their peers operating, and see if they can learn anything from other team leaders. Other things, obviously, that professional development that happens through various trainings, through conferences, webinars, things of that nature. Additional work that they're doing, they may actually have either a contract work where they actually have responsibility within a management system at a particular organization. They might do some coaching. All of these things are all methods that they can use in order to advance their own competence and ensure that they maintain their competence. we come to the annex. And I mentioned earlier that there were several that I had cherry-picked for the previous training that I did that are of particular importance for a lot of audits. The team leader should have some level of training and knowledge for all of these different aspects of the audits, because as a team leader, there may be things that there is a technical expert who knows things and they will be the go-to person. However, the lead auditor should also have some working knowledge. For example, A11 has to do with life cycle. They should have some knowledge about what that means and how one would go about auditing life cycle or auditing a supply chain. So it is particularly important for team leaders to have more knowledge and to be better versed in the guidance that is available within those annexes. And next, we reiterate one final time, get a copy of that standard, ISO 9011 2018. It's got a lot of good stuff in it that is going to help you as an auditor and help you pass your exam. And I'll turn it back to you, Scott.
Thank you, Denise. Excellent presentation, and thank you all for your participation today. As Denise just said, it's really important that you obtain, read, and understand the 19,011-2018 standard. It is the fundamental document behind the auditing profession. I also want to just take a moment to let you know how you take these assessments. You probably have heard me say this before in previous training sessions, but just to reiterate, the process is quite simple. You just visit the Exemplar Global website, click on the login button in the upper right-hand corner. That will take you to your online portal. You enter your username and password. If you've forgotten your password, just click on the reset password link and you can get started there. Once you've done that, just click on the tab reading Transition Exams. Here you'll see what exams you are required to complete. Just click on the exam link, pay your exam fee, and you'll be ready to go. Once you've completed the examination, the system will automatically update your record, so there'll be no need for you to let us know that you've completed the assessment. So again, I want to thank Denise for this excellent presentation for the entire AUTL training series, and we hope you found this to be a useful session. So if you have any questions regarding these assessments, any technical questions for us, any questions about your certification, please contact Exemplar Global directly. You can email us at certification@exemplarglobal.org. You can also call any one of the Exemplar Global offices. If you have questions for Denise not related to how you take this assessment or your certification, you can send her an email at the email address found on your screen. Again, thank you all. Thank you, Denise. Have a great day.